Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Ma'am, we are waiting for the participants to join, and Claire ma'am is on the way. So we'll start the session soon, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Should I wait or should I?
Ma'am, you may join after 5 minutes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. You
All
may
right,
stay
thank you.
online, but you can.
Okay.
You need to exit the meeting. Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Hello, Parvati. Hope you're fine.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Let me.
Maybe others are taking time to join. They'll join soon.
It's not yet time. You said 9 o'clock. It must be 8:55.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure that I was on time.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, for some reason, my daughter's ID is showing.
That is actually Saparna, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't know how to sign out of it right now because that means I'll have to sign into my account. But I hope that's okay. And
Don't you have to
can recognize me?
Name? Maybe that Bhushan and part reveals your identity.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope
sure.
it doesn't confuse people. Anyway, I will reveal myself on time.
Okay, Parvati.
Anyway, as long as you administrators know what's going on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What time is it there, Parvati?
It's coming up on 9:30. It's 9:26 at night.
Oh, fine.
Yeah, it's very cold here today.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because of the this topic is very appropriate because the climate has been highly erratic in the United States. Warm days, cold days, very cold days, tornadoes, and so on and so forth.
We get to read it in the news.
When it brings devastation, you will hear it in the news.
Sure.
Until then, it becomes slow. It's a local event. How is the weather out there?
It's fine. It's fine here.
I mean, how warm is it, or
Moderate.
So it's like a pleasant winter time.
Not exactly winter. It's warm actually. Certain days it's very hot, terribly hot daytime.
Supriya, this is both on ground and online, isn't it?
No, it's only online. Just online.
Okay, I didn't realize that. So yesterday, how about yesterday? Was it also online only?
It was online. Again, it was online. Suja joined us from online.
That's great.
Life is back to normal there, Parvati?
Almost.
Okay, fine.
But it's not completely. And now I'm reading reports of an Omicron variant.
Yeah, Omicron.
Variant to that.
Yeah, variant be Omicron, right? Yeah, true.
Yeah. So then you must be hearing about the weather in UK and Northern Europe.
Yeah, sure.
So
Canada, right?
Scary.
Yeah, true.
Hmm. Hi, Clara.
A very fine morning to one and all of you. Today we move on to the second day of our international conference, and we have with us Dr. Parvati. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Parvati.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Clara. How are you today?
We are good. How are you? Is it late, too late in the evening for you?
Not at all. Not late at all.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Shall we start today's program? Over to Father Vinod.
Good morning, all. We are now into the second day of the International Conference on Reading Humanities in the 21st Century, Aesthetics, Theory, and Praxis. Before we begin the program, let's invoke God's presence with a silent prayer. The first session of today's conference will be handled by Dr. Parvati Bhushanan. Before I invite Dr. Parvati, who will deal with the topic Ecoculture, Footprints Across the Anthropocene Porch, let me call upon Mr. Ebin to introduce the speaker.
Good morning, respected teachers. So let me welcome the author of the text, Dr. Parvati Bhushanan. Dr. Parvati Bhushanan has a doctoral degree in English language and literature. She has been faculty at Catherine Community College for nearly 18 years. Dr. Bhushanan teaches freshman composition, British literature, and world literature. Dr. Bhushanan has been a long-time resident of Madison, USA, where she lives with her family. Her husband, Sri Bhushanan, is a software engineer, as well as the freelance writer for the local public radio station, WLRA. Dr. Bhushanan has two daughters, Meenakshi and Abhamma, both seniors in college and high school. The family has a fifth member by the name Sri Bhushanan, who has colleagues and loves Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. So is that my cue to start?
Yeah. Over to you, Dr. Parvati.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that engaging introduction. Honorable Principal, Professor Jojo, Vice Principal, Dr. Cynthia Michael, and my dear friend, Dr. Claire. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Claire, for inviting me to address this learned audience. It has been intellectually rewarding to prepare for today. The material available on eco-criticism is copious, amorphous, diverse, and extensive. Hence, the effort to cobble this paper together went through stages that included wonder, lethargy, diffidence, dormancy, and emergence. My title for today's presentation is a little different from what I had initially provided Dr. Claire. It is actually the genealogy of eco-criticism in the Anthropocene epoch. Anthropocene is an unofficial demarcation of geological time that's witnessing the impact of human activities on the Earth's systems. The exact beginning of this recent age of man is still under dispute. The genealogy is the origin and development of eco-criticism. At this point, I would like to share a slide. If screen sharing is enabled. I'm not able to share. Could somebody enable that,
It is
please?
enabled, ma'am. It's enabled now.
It's enabled for.
So can you see this? So just to show you the Anthropocene epoch and where we are right now. So right on top, it's the age of humanity that's witnessing so many changes in the environment. Now let's look at an outline of my presentation. So first, I'm going to give you a current scenario of the environment. Then I discuss eco-criticism, its genealogy. Then the tenets of eco-criticism, from which I move on to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I want to analyze briefly. And I conclude with an overview of what needs to be done with eco-literature as the medium. In 1980, there was a much publicized wager between Paul Ehrlich, an American population biologist, and the American economist Julian L. Simon. Ehrlich predicted that the growth of human population will result in famine and resource shortages. Simon, on the other hand, argued that human resourcefulness will conquer these problems. Simon actually won the bet because prices did not rise, people did not starve and die. This debate continues among environmentalists between those who predict doom and those who have faith in Homo sapiens technologicus. Today, the cornucopians, those who believe that the Earth's natural resources are inextinguishable, and the Jeremiahs suggest divergent modus operandi to resolve the future shortages. The conservative cornucopians insist on humanity's genius for innovation to be the savior, while the doomsayers ask for change in political policy and culture. While the cornucopians and environmental Jeremiahs disagree, ultimately both positions have faith in the human potential to create a better world. Cornucopians, through innovation within the framework that exists today, and Jeremiah's through changes in policy and culture. If we look at these two extreme positions, it is evident that the cornucopian's perspectives helps the confirmation bias of the powerful interests of the socio-economic and political systems of the world. However, from a purely objective point of view, it seems necessary to incorporate both interpretations in any future plan of action. This is the background from which emerged eco-criticism. It was born out of a human passion to be instrumental in bringing about a solution to this specter. Let me put out two symbolic tropes to draw your attention to the anthropogenic calamities humanity faces. These tell us that we need to comprehend the precarity of the human condition. The Doomsday Clock is a symbolic clock that keeps track of the rise and fall of man-made threats to the extinction of the human species. In 2022, it stands at 100 seconds to midnight. The Doomsday Clock is also a bulletin that estimates man-made threat to the world. It focuses on three main areas: nuclear risk, climate change, and disruptive technologies.
And then Shinobu herself returns to center stage for her incredible final act.
What connects these topics is a driving belief that because humans created them, we can control them. In 1947, when this clock was set for the first time, the only threat was warfare. Today, the threats have tripled. And you can actually see that being played out in the international stage today, right this day. Second is Earth Overshoot Day. Earth Overshoot Day marks the date when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services in a year exceeds what Earth can generate in that year. It was July for the year 2021. From Doomsday Clock to Earth Overshoot Day, it's obvious that humanity is a threat to itself and a threat to the national resources needed for survival. But there is something else, a real event that took place in South Africa. Some of you may remember it, some of you may recall it. Cape Town's Day Zero. In November 2018, Cape Town in South Africa came dangerously close to Day Zero, the moment when 4 million people would be left without water. Its existential crisis was triggered by a severe and unanticipated drought that turned all the local reservoirs into dust bowls. Scientists predict that the whole region will face extreme drought before the end of the century. We have to ask ourselves this question: can this not happen in other parts of the world? How about our fellow creatures in the animal kingdom? We have been somewhat merciless in our interaction with other members of the animal kingdom. If we look at the biomass pie chart that you have there up on the screen right now, you can see that while large animals are at 100 million tons, domesticated animals at 700 million tons, and humans at 300 million tons. Biomass is the total mass of organisms in a given area. The stark discrepancy between wild animals and domesticated animals shows the unquestionable suzerainty of man over animals. There's one term that I must mention in this context: the Great Acceleration. This refers to post-1945, when the world saw a boom in human populations and related activities, including but not limited to water, fossil fuels, and this happened after the Second World War. This is also the period that is overseeing the greatest reduction in wild animals. In addition to natural living systems, ecological scientists predict that rising temperatures, rising oceans, melting glaciers will render many parts of the world inhospitable. So now let me start on the body of my address. What is the genealogy of studies in ecocritical theory? Why ecocritical theory? What are the tenets of eco-criticism? How does past literature assimilate us with eco-critical theory? What is the function of eco-literature to help us bypass this anthropogenic climate change? 30 years prior to the use of the word eco-criticism, a groundbreaking book was published. It's called The Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, this is the screen that I want you to observe. Aldo Leopold is putatively the father of wildlife ecology in the US. For today, the lasting legacy, his lasting legacy is an essay called The Land Ethic, included in the collection, The Sand County Almanac. Leopold was a conservationist as well as a professor of agriculture at the University of Wisconsin. His early principles that circle around eco-criticism is known as the land ethic. In this essay, which begins with a reference to Odysseus, Homer's Odysseus, and the expendability of private property, Leopold writes like a literary critic. So this book was published in 1949. He was the pioneer ecologist who advocated for a land ethic in strongly evocative literary language using literary tropes to convince his audience. He calls for an ethical relationship between people and nature by drawing literary parallels. In this slide, you will see the relationship between me and you governed by an ethical system, the 10 Commandments, between me and society with the golden rule, democratic system. But there is no law that connects me, no ethical system that I owe the land. And that is very telling. Even today, only a handful of nations have laws against ecocide. However, the paradigm shift came 30 years later when the word was used in 1978 in an essay by William Ruckett called Literature and Ecology, an Experiment in Eco-Criticism. Since then, the American eco-critical genealogy has had a rhizomatic development. The usage did not gain critical attention until 1989 at the Western Literature Association meeting in Idaho, USA, when Cheryl Glott-Felty reiterated the term to urge its adoption to the amorphous field of literary theory that has been called the study of nature writing. It was born out of the need for a matrix between characters, species, ecosystems, corporations, governments, and activists. The demands of an interdisciplinary approach for clear understanding of an accelerated deterioration of the earth as we knew it. The first professor of literature and in the environment in the US was Cheryl Glott-Felty. Now, to the core of the theory. What are the features of eco-literature? Now, the identification of eco-literature is based on certain dominant characteristics. Eco-criticism uses these characteristics to analyze eco-literature. Here are some of the characteristics. These principles were published by Lawrence Buell in his pioneering work, The Environmental Imagination, which was published in 1995. First, I quote, "The non-human environment is present not merely as a framing device, but as a presence that begins to suggest that human history is implicated in natural history." Close quotations. So here, natural history, what he means by natural history is the scientific study of plants and animals. As an example, the non-human environment are all characters in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And we also see the epistemic growth of the character Gilgamesh in tandem with the growth or even deterioration of the environment. Culture springs from nature, the environment, and literature mushrooms from the cultural substratum. And in this context, I must mention Darkness. Many of you must have read that poem by Lord Byron, published in 1816. This poem is a reference to the volcanic eruption in 1815 of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. This poem is literary evidence of the environment's disruption of human and more than human activities for those 2 years. 1816, in fact, is known as the year without a summer.
So in order to start talking about
Number two,
Salman Rushdie's
open quotations. The human interest is not understood to be the only legitimate interest. If we look at famous poems that exemplify this, we must think about Walt Whitman's Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking. I'm sure many of you have read that poem. The other story that I want to mention comes from the Bhagavata Purana, called Gajendra Moksha. Number three, human accountability to the environment is part of the text's ethical orientation. In Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a poem written in medieval Great Britain, this message is very clear. We shall discuss that anon. Finally, number four, open quotations, some sense of the environment as a process rather than as a constant or a given is at least implicit in the text. So that's a very broad principle, but I will give you an example. If you have read the Epic of Gilgamesh, you will know that deforestation is a motif. And this literature, this epic poem is the earliest known poem, extant poem in the world. But there are several other buzzwords that we must utilize to establish the paradigm shift from anthropocentric to ecocentric writings. Anthropogenic, that which is caused by humans. Ecocide, the criminal and willful destruction of the environment. Anthropocentrism, that which focuses on the paradigm of human superiority and separateness. It's like a kind of anthroparchy, like patriarchy. Ecocentrism, the view that the larger interest of the ecosystem overrides the interest of any individual species. In this context, I must mention Barry Commoner, the father of radical environmentalism or eco-socialism. He has referred to 4 informal laws of ecology. Everything is connected to everything else. Everything must go somewhere. Nature knows best, and nothing comes from nothing. Commoner asserted that the scientists are obligated to make scientific knowledge accessible to the public. It is evident that eco-literature is interdisciplinary to make it meaningful. The last term from this loosely compiled glossary is biocentrism, the view that all organisms, including humans, are part of a large biotic web or network or community whose interests must constrain or direct the human interest, must constrain the human interest. Eco-criticism shows us that the dichotomy of science and literature is a false one. When we dissect this further, literature cannot be separate from its environment. So the value of eco-literature is priceless in its role in edifying humanity. Eco-criticism is the literary method of inquiry of texts that examine human relationship with a more than human world, using one or all of the tenets provided by Lawrence Buell. Now, a discussion of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. A discussion of this poem reinforces the indomitable power of nature. Why is this poem significant? Because it was written in the 12th and 13th centuries. So obviously the poet, who's anonymous, was a visionary. This long poem is delightful with its alliterative lines, and it dates around the second half of the 14th century. It is easy to read with its regular meter and musical diction, and is also engaging in its plot. More recent literary critics see it as the world's first eco-poem that clearly marks man's dwelling as non-intrusive of the forest. While the poem is a satire on the evasive nature of chivalry, it's also a powerful, thinly disguised lesson on the human man's need of nature. The precocious message is that man can never overpower nature. The poem itself came from a single copy. The seemingly minor fact somehow elevates its greatness. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight manuscript contains 3 other poems, all Christian poetry. They are pearl, patience, and purity. So the poet is not known to us by his name, but he is known as the Pearl Poet. The action in the poem is in King Arthur's Camelot with the Knights of the Round Table. Among its multiple ideas, it's dominantly a true Christian tale with striking literary characteristics. The title of the poem contains the word green. 2 things to note here. Eco-literature is called green studies in the UK. Next, the color green is a recurring motif in the poem. The poem opens in the dead of winter during a Christmas party. And this is taking place at King Arthur's castle. The mirth in the castle is interrupted by the arrival of a Green Knight who wears no armor but carries a large axe. He offers a wager to the Knights of the Round Table. If one knight is brave enough to cut off his head, he will allow it to happen. That itself implies he has the strength to stop it, but he won't. Sir Gawain, the weakest knight, cuts off the burly Green Knight's head. It rolls to the floor until the Green Knight retrieves it only to place it easily back on his neck. The analogy with the natural processes is clear. Man is disrespectful of nature, but nature is so powerful and man so meager that nature can easily rebound from human chauvinism. Soon, Sir Gawain embarks on a dangerous journey into the heart of the jungle in search of the Green Knight. Meanwhile, the seasons change. He meets with Lord Bertilac and his wife in their castle, where he resides before he sets off again to meet the Green Knight who lives close to Bertilac's castle. Unbeknownst to Gawain, Bertilac is also the Green Knight. At the end of the story, the Green Girdle's magical might rescues Gawain from being beheaded by the Green Knight. When examined through the lens of eco-criticism, the binary opposition between human habitat and unsettled regions of ancient Britain is the most obvious characteristic. While the perspective is human chauvinism, the Green Knight and Lord Bertilac both teach Sir Gawain human accountability to nature. Bertilac, for instance, even while hunting, has deep respect for animals. His conflict with nature is structurally different from Sir Gawain's. There is a sublimity in nature that man's subjective needs cannot annihilate. On the contrary, nature's systems are fodder to man's tranquil balance. The Green Knight also shows that man is not separate from nature and not superior to nature. Here in this text is embedded the peculiar geography of ancient Britain. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight disseminates valuable ecological information through pleasure and edification. It achieves its goals as eco-literature. The one who tells the story rules the world. This quotation is attributed to Plato or Hopi Native Americans. The quotation tells us that the power of the story is deep. So what does a story do to the human brain? A story has the potential to influence and bring about profound changes in the way people think. Psychologically, we are transported to the world of the story, and this transportation leads to identification and empathic feelings. We form parasocial relationships with the characters in a story. Literature always had a role in bringing about political and social change in the physical environment and is more important than ever. Today, the world is hurtling towards an inevitable inferno, perhaps. It is up to literateurs and scientists to create a bedrock of scientific and non-scientific knowledge across human societies. Only then can we galvanize a maelstrom of ideas to rescue the human race from extinction. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. I welcome questions from you. Thank you.
Participants, now you may ask questions to the resource person.
Shall I ask a question, ma'am?
Sure.
Ma'am, I think there is a new branch of, what shall I say, a new perspective regarding literature that comes up in the West. I do not know whether it is right. Is there something called farm poetics?
I'm sure. I'm sure this field of eco-literature is so vast. There are so many new terms. There will be farm, there's nature writings and so on, but I haven't come across it myself, though I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sorry I cannot be of greater use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you say farm poetics or farm literature?
No, ma'am, farm poetics, a perspective on literature. Of course, farm literature would be there. And from farm literature, there is some kind of understanding regarding the literature.
I've read about eco-poetics.
Okay.
So I don't know if, for example, the poem that I discussed right now is an eco-poem. So yes, it is highly likely to find that. But I don't have an, I will certainly look into it because it's very interesting for me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Parvati,
Yes.
do you think this shift of paradigm from anthropocentric to ecocentrism has given popularity to this climate fiction that we have now?
Yeah, climate fiction. When I read, of course, it's all part of it, but it also seems to be a bit like science fiction, but I'm not certain. I saw that being discussed in a conference for, it was, pardon me.
It's an upcoming genre. This climate fiction almost established itself. Genre of climate fiction.
Yeah.
What we
Yes.
call to the likes of Amitabh Ghosh.
The thing with eco literature is that it's not just a global overarching phenomenon. It is very local. So in India, you will find different types of writings which will pertain to the culture there. And in the West, it will be something else. So if we want to take a good survey of it, we must read the book, The Oxford Reader, because that has articles from the Far East to the West and includes a lot of the nations that are directly creating their own special genres. So I'm sorry, what was your question, Supriya? Was it about climate fiction being a part of eco literature?
Yeah, is it a pointer to this shift in what we call the paradigm shift from the anthropocentric to the ecocentric?
Yes, it is, because if you look at the 4 principles that Lawrence Buell outlined, one of it is certainly that, where you talk about the processes, the process of nature, and the climate change is part of that process. And including that, changing man's adoration of nature from afar. For example, Wordsworth's poem Daffodils. You see a certain detachment of the poet in that poem. If you look at maybe another work, Nutting, I think, where he talks about more serious issues about the environment. Yeah, so yes, there is clearly a shift from the anthropocentrism.
Thank you, Bharti. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Supriya.
Participants, any more questions?
I can take questions if you have any. I see there are some questions in the chat box.
Yeah, there is. Post-humanism itself is in a way more adhesive into anthropocentrism.
Yeah. I don't know because eco-criticism is didactic. Eco-criticism, it has a purpose. And if you were to, at least what I have read of Western eco-criticism, the point of it is to galvanize people into acting and changing their cultural behavior. So that's the thrust of it. And eco-criticism helps us understand texts, elevate their value for us to change our modes of behavior. I know this is all very strange, a city dweller talking to city dwellers about how to change culture and embrace nature. But as I said in the beginning, about that wager between Paul Ehrlich and Julian Simon, what is interesting is that we need modern technology. At the same time, we need to learn how to conserve resources. Any other questions? If you have any other questions, I can take questions.
Participants, any questions?
You can type it in the box if you don't. Yes, yes.
Ma'am, this is Nandini Praveen from Chennai. I am an assistant professor. I would like to take up research on this topic, ma'am. Can you throw some light on the different aspects of eco-criticisms which I can focus on?
One great idea would be, I don't know if you're interested in Indian texts, but I think animism as a religion gives you so much insight into early human contact with nature. Now that could be a beginning. I'm not saying that that should be the end of it, but to look at it from that way and then examining Indian texts is also an amazing resource, I think. What are your thoughts about it, Nandini? Did you have some other topics in mind?
Ma'am, I'm a nature lover. I would very much like to focus on nature. And of course, I would be a very responsible person. That is what I would like the rest of the generation to focus on. The responsibility towards nature and other living things, not just the dominance of man, but give equal status to the rest of the living animals in the rest of the kingdom as well.
Yeah. I have typed the name of the book for you. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That's the essay. The book is the Sand County Almanac.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to know your contact details if in case I would like to still keep asking for a lot more of clarity in my work, ma'am.
Sure. Let me just. I'm writing down my email for you. Just note that the P in Parvati is lowercase.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good luck, Nandini. I'm sure you'll find a lot of material.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Sure.
Any more questions, participants?
Ma'am, I think there was actually a comment on post-humanism being adhesive to eco-criticism. Could you say something more about it, ma'am?
Oh, well, I don't quite, what post-humanism seems to me a branch of a very specialized theory for scientific analysis. Sci-fi theory, which will be more, I don't even know the branch, like postmodernism, posthumanism, all of those would just, am I right or am I wrong? Someone can tell me more about it, someone in the crowd. I don't know if it is, I think of eco-criticism as completely separate, as something that doesn't align itself with anything else other than being an interdisciplinary theory. That's my understanding from my readings of those primary textbooks.
Thank you.
So can somebody talk about posthumanism? I don't want to call out names, but it'd be nice if someone who has the knowledge about posthumanism to speak up and enlighten all of us. It looks like I'll have to call out names, huh? Oh, that's a very good question. I have a question there. I find that very interesting. Ma'am, can you throw some light on organic vegetables and fruits being marketed? And nature is again falling into capitalism. Yes. There's a book that I came across, which was about environmental studies. And of course, you have your famous, we have our famous eco-feminist. Can somebody name her? Who will name the famous eco-feminist from India? Again.
Vandana Shiva.
Yes, yes, Vandana Shiva. So Vandana Shiva's advocates mixed farming and so on. But when you talk about organic vegetables and fruits being marketed, when there is a demand for it, it will happen. See, we can't escape that. And if it is falling into capitalism, that is something the social systems will have to try to tackle. You can start by creating your own market, by starting your own organic garden at home, if at all possible. And that is one thing everybody can do in order to feel close to the land. But again, talking in that manner is not something I want to do, because I'm conscious of my failings as a human being living in a nation that uses up most of the Earth's resources. But still we can try. And one of the things that you can try is planting your own garden, vegetable garden, even in the winter, which is difficult to do here. But it's something you can do. Okay. So organic vegetables and fruits will be made because there's a huge demand for it, because there is so much of information about how carcinogenic mass-produced fruits and vegetables are. So people are turning more and more towards organic vegetables. But we don't know what the future will be for those vegetables, but yes, there is certainly the demand. So if you have more questions, We have, I think, about 5 minutes more. I'm not sure. Am I correct, Claire?
Yeah, not an issue.
Okay.
Any more questions, participants? Someone now posted a picture, but it's not very clear.
Mhm.
Okay. The
Share it?
picture's not there anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh. Was it about nature?
So something, a sticker. A sticker
Oh, okay.
to do with nature.
So shall we wind up then, Claire?
Okay, participants, if there are no more questions, we wind up session 1. Over to the official vote of thanks. Thank you very much, my dear friend. That was a wonderful talk.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your heartwarming, eloquent talk. May I now call upon Ms. Alaga V to propose the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone over here. Honorable Chief Guest Dr. Parvati Bhushanan, respected Dr. Clara B. Reshma, and all the participants. It's such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you all dignitaries on behalf of the Department of English, Fatima Mada National College. I would like to express my gratitude to all esteemed delegates of this webinar for their presence and contribution to make this webinar a great success. I extend my gratitude to our Honorable Chief Guest Dr. Parvati Bhushanan, faculty from Calhoun Community College, Alabama, USA, for taking out from her busy schedule to grace this event. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Parvati ma'am for giving an excellent coverage to our today's session, Genealogy of Eco-Literature. We are all inspired by your words. Once again, thank you ma'am for inspiring and encouraging us with your words on this special day. I extend my gratitude to Dr. Clara B. Reshma, head of the department, for her support and guidance for organizing such an informative session. I must thank the organizing team for working hard for the past few days to make this webinar successful. Finally, I congratulate all the participants for their active participation. Once again, thank you everyone for making it a great success. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And good luck for your next session.
Thank you. We move on to the main course.
Okay.
Participants, N. Deepak Sharavanan, are you here? One more. Hello. Gabriela Salche. Gabriela's here actually. Gabriela.
Yes, ma'am.
She's there. Is there. Gabriela.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, are you ready to present your paper reminding the ecological cascade of Earth?
Right now, ma'am.
Yeah, we send you a mail.
Can I do after one person?
Pardon? Okay, let me just see. Deepak, because your papers are also in theme with this. Deepak Sharavanan.
Medium
Dr. Edwin Jairaj, are you here? Okay, Gabriela, can you start after 10 minutes then?
All right, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Okay, so now it is, you can present your paper at 10:10.
All right.
Is that fine?
Okay, ma'am.
Have a short break of 10 minutes and then Gabriela will present her paper.
All right. Ma'am, shall I start?
ഞാൻ വെങ്കായമല്ല.
Gabriela, you can join the WhatsApp. We have posted a Google Meet link on WhatsApp. You may join that and present the paper.
क्या चंद्र क्या बोला अम्मा जरूर बैठेंगे रंगा तेरा नाम रंगा तेरा
Hello, Jojo sir. Hello, Jojo sir. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning, sir.
Morning. Sessions going.
പിന്നെ നമ്മൾക്കിപ്പോ ഒരു നമുക്കിപ്പോ ഒരു പുതിയ ടീച്ചർ വന്നല്ലോ. Can she also be included?
Any other query or suggestion? Right. It is said that an ecosystem has a diversity is the richest. Exactly as regular scientists said, the humans have been destroying the biodiversity to their own selfish motives. And by presenting the characters of these novels, especially the Prodigal Summer and Bible, it's better to have association with nature rather than with human beings. I'll present it. Approach of to bring nature back to its shape. So I think let us take a leaf out of my presentation. It's quite to leave here a better place than when we arrived. Well, now we have one more presentation that is supposed to be presented by Deepak. It is available. Let us go with it. Otherwise, we will come back for the second session. Thank you. Explain. It is outpouring of all the concepts.
Tom, then we'll say എല്ലാത്തിനും കൂടെ unmute ചെയ്യണേ. Unmute. Hello, we start the next session at 11 a.m. We have a talk by Ms. Smita John, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Government College, Attendam. Hello. Paper presentations follow after Ms. Smita John's talk. We will have paper presentations. So the paper presenters, please be ready with your papers. We will share the Google Meet link for the paper presentations.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Hello, welcome, Smita.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, we are just waiting because we had a break. We are just waiting, telling the participants to join.
Okay, ma'am, please.
Hi, നമസ്കാരം. പണ്ടോടെ ഇതുണ്ട്.
Participants, we'll start the session soon.
Obviously, we have to, it's like an exam, no? When you
Welcome back, everyone. We move on to the fourth session of our international conference, Reading Humanities in the 21st Century, Aesthetics, Theory, and Praxis. We have the session by Smita John, and over to Roshni, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Fatima Mada National College.
Good morning, one and all. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for this session. It is Smita John. Smita John, Assistant Professor of English, Department of Collegiate Education, Government of Kerala, is presently working at Department of English, Government College, Attingal, Thiruvananthapuram. Infinite passion for teaching and overwhelming enthusiasm are attributes of Smita, who is a social activist, career counselor, motivational speaker, writer, lyricist, YouTuber, and a marvelous organizer of events. She has also expressed her identity as a radio personnel of class with amazing literary programs and genuine interviews. She is a bilingual writer and speaker whose articles and poetry is featured in journals and magazines. She has contributed immensely as part of the textbook development team of the State Council for Educational Research and Training and of the State Literacy Mission. She has won accolades as a resource person for higher secondary training programs in different districts in Kerala. Or as a research scholar in cultural studies, she has presented papers in national and international seminars. She has publications in international seminars, in international and national journals to work. Dance and travel are her other areas of interest. She has traveled extensively throughout different states in India and to European and Arab countries as well, which adds infinite cultural variety to her writings. Inter-Semiotic Translation, Tolstoy's Anna Karenina as verbal narrative, Katha Prasanga, was her recently presented paper at the international webinar hosted by Kashmir University. Language teaching, refashioning the role of English teacher is a recently published paper, the International Journal, Faculty of Scientific Journal. A special issue of the papers presented at the International Conference of the Department of Linguistics at the University of Kerala and the Department of English Language at the Faculty of Education, Tamar University, Yemen. Muriya Koeda is her recently published collections of poems in Malayalam. Thank you all, and over to Smita, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the kind words of introduction. A warm good morning to one and all. Hope I am audible.
Very low volume, Smita.
Okay, ma'am. Please.
Now good.
Excuse me. A warm good morning to one and all. Am I audible, ma'am, now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Respected principal and dynamic academician, Professor Dr. Jojo PJ, Head of the Department of English and convener of the two-day international webinar, and my beloved teacher, Dr. Claire B. Reshma, IQAC coordinator and general convener of the webinar, Dr. Shaiju PN, honorable organizing committee members, eminent academicians around the globe, faculty, family members of the Department of English, Fatima Mata National College, dear research scholars and students who are the real stars of the day. A bouquet of gratitude for inviting me to speak in the panel of the two-day international conference on reading humanities in the 21st century, aesthetics, theory, and praxis. I am overwhelmed with joy to join the Platinum Jubilee celebrations of our alma mater, Fatima Mata National College, the premier autonomous institution of the state that has made commendable academic achievements through the decades. Now, before going on to my presentation titled Literature as a Semiotic Door to Popular Culture, Aesthetics, Theory, and Praxis, let me share my screen. Hope it would be visible to you. Please enable me. Please enable me to share my screen.
1 minute, Smita.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, now you can share the screen.
Thank you. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Oh, thank you for that. One second, please. Are the slides moving? Okay. Thank you. So we shall start with. So literature as a semiotic door to popular culture, aesthetics, theory, and praxis is the title of my session. Now, before moving on to that, let us discuss a question. Why literature? Why should we learn literature? There are research scholars and students who are here. Now, can you share something about that? Why do we learn literature? As students of literature, as people pursuing literature, please, you can be very free. You can unmute and just give. Why do we learn literature? Please be very free. Why do we learn literature? This is a big question, cannot be answered very quickly. Of course, it can take long hours or even days for the discussion, but still you can say something. Please, your views on why we should learn literature. Please be very free.
Within the chat box, someone has responded.
Yeah, I'm Vinita Sai from Chennai.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Yes.
Please.
In my opinion, I mean, there is no, I don't know, that's my humble opinion. I think literature is the subject that offers a gamut of, aspects that are associated with life. And so it holds a mirror to life, and I mean, everything, all that we need, it could be about how to live, how to, read things, or, our relationship with nature, our relationship with other human beings. I mean, everything is found in literature. So I would say that I'm proud to, be a student of literature because of that. Thank you for the
question. Thank you. Such a wonderful answer. So your response was excellent. As you said, we are always revisiting the past to find the path to the present, as it is really interesting for any human who enjoys a civilized way of life. And we talk about moral values. We say that literature can be used for instilling moral values, but that concept of literature was questioned and we moved on to other areas. It is for aesthetic purpose. And so this is a question for discussion before the literature students. So we're not talking about that. Now, literature, as we know, has got a kind of a cathartic effect which can refine us. The different genres of literature, they help us to improve our linguistic and communicative skills, as that is the basic function of language and literature. So reading literary textbooks gives us an experience that is a varied experience that enriches us, that makes us more powerful, that helps us to face life with more confidence. So reading of literary text, dance, drama, verbal narratives. I have given the title here. As you know, reading does not mean mere reading of literary textbooks. You can read dance, drama, verbal narratives, cinema. So the theoretical aspect of what Roland Barthes says is text is not a definite object, but a play of meanings. We talk of everything as a text. That is the modern concept that we have. Now, we know that very few of us have read the original text of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or the Bible. But we are very familiar with so many stories and instances from these epics and the Bible. So how does this happen? This is because we have been experiencing this. We have been reading these as literary pieces, as cinema. Sorry, there is some interruption. Okay, thank you. So reading does not mean mere reading of literary textbook. Moving on to that, we have different sorts of reading. So we are watching a dance. Through dance, we are trying to communicate something. See here, when we can see a symbol is used. So there are mudras or symbols through which we communicate. In literature, in language, within the language domain, words are the primary things through which we communicate, the medium through which we communicate. When we move on to the other kinds of artistic forms to which literature opens its door, it is the kind of, beyond this kind of literary experiences within the other medium of expressions, there are symbols through which they communicate. So reading literary text gives us a varied experience into other literary texts, as we see, as we call the kind of intertextuality. Taking, for example, book 9 of Odyssey is the material for Tennyson's Lotus Eaters. Like that, the kind of intertextuality. So like that, there is the kind of experience or the expressions or the hints that they take from literature for the other means of communication. Actually, literature based as words for the medium developed later as a means of communication. We know that early man who lived in caves and ate raw flesh communicated through symbols. Even now we are communicating more through symbols. Like when we are using our phone as a medium for communication, the different mass media everywhere, now we use these kinds of symbols. We have made a return to these kinds of things. So symbols are used for communication. Words are only a medium of communication within the language domain. So here you can see a slide, and we know that from the earliest times of our existence, far before the creation of the first modern civilization as an irreplicable way of exploring human thoughts and emotions, dance and drama has been used as a means of communication, and it used to communicate very effectively. So as far as drama is concerned, now you can hear see the symbols used here. And what is it trying to comment? This is a symbol in dance using the single hand, the single hasta. So this is a kind of symbol that is used. It can be used to communicate a cock, a crane, or camel, child, or calf. Like we have different connotations for the same word in a language, the mudras can also be changed, can also represent different things accordingly. Now, what role does these kinds of things play in our life? In a country like India, where we have different kinds of cultures, we have different linguistic backgrounds, food habits, festivals, and all that, we know that we have a mixed culture. And so beyond language, we have our own language domain. Beyond this language, we communicate using these kinds of we can do these kinds of intercultural communication effectively for a restorative life through these kinds of presentations, whether it be dance or drama or things like that. We know that the paintings of Leonardo da Vinci are so much appreciated. So it stands the test of time. Across the cultures, we find that these things, music is an art in itself. A recent news that we have read in the newspapers is that the aviation department of India has decided to play music in aerodromes as well as flights when people are waiting for the flights in aerodromes. So this is all part of a cultural this is a cultural aspect that is brought in there. And these kinds of things show how important intercultural communication is. For our national days, we have a display of all these things in order to promote intercultural communication. So we have different kinds of languages. We have the kind of like mother tongue is everything to us and all that. But in a country like India, of course, English has got its significance, and it provides a common platform for us to communicate all that. But beyond all that, without the language domain, there is something that we can communicate. So to quote Stuart Hall's reception theory, media texts are encoded and decoded. The producer encodes messages and values into their media, which are then decoded by the audience. So in dance, they use a particular mudra. In drama, they produce a kind of bhavas from which we have the rasa, where the rasa is produced in the person, in the spectator who is watching that. So to go back to the Rasa theory. So we know all these things. The producer encodes messages, certain messages and values are produced where words are no longer a medium, but instead there are different signs and symbols which are used as media. So let us see what semiotics is, what the semiotic tradition is. The semiotic tradition, the word comes from a linguistic background. The semiotic tradition explores the study of signs and symbols as a part of communication, as a significant part of communication. So semiotics is the science of signs. So it's a scientific study of how we communicate through signs. The Italian semiotician Umberto Eco proposed that every cultural phenomenon may be studied as a communication. So language has got much to do with culture. Other than communication, cultural transference is one of the basic functions of language, as we all know. Semiotics is presently a developing field of study which is very live and active. It is a growing field of study. And at the end of the 19th century, Charles St. Peirce, the American philosopher, it was he who proposed and described a study called semiotics. In his course in general linguistics, the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure independently proposed a science that he called semiology. So this is the background of the semiotics. Since then, semiotics and semiology have become alternative forms, alternative terms, and the semiotic tradition has been exploring the study of signs and symbols as a part of communication. So that without any doubt, we can say that semiotics is the science of science, and it was introduced by the Italian semiotician Umberto Eco. And he proposed that every cultural phenomenon can be studied as a communication. The signs or conveyors of meaning is not limited to the realm of language, as I told you. So signs and signals and a great variety of other human activity and production participate in a particular discourse. Now, when we talk about literature, we can say that the semiotics, excuse me. So when we try to, what is a writer trying to communicate to us? The writer is trying to communicate to us his feelings, his aspirations, his dreams, his experiences of the past, and things like that. So how can this be brought in as an intersemiotic translation? That is what we are going to examine. So the next term is intrasemiotic, and terms are intrasemiotic and intersemiotic translation. What do you mean by intrasemiotic translation? In this literary translation, a text is translated into another text using purely verbal means. It remains in the verbal domain within the system of signs and meaning we call language. So intrasemiotic translation is within the language domain itself. It can be from one genre to other, or from one language to another, things like that. But when it comes to intersemiotic translation, the medium changes. The process is facilitated by perceiving and experiencing non-verbal media through visual, auditory, and other sensory things. Now, let us take, for example, the film Vaishali. So talking about it, the story of Vaishali is a sub-story from the Mahabharata, which narrates the story of the daughter of a royal mistress of the kingdom of Anga. And Angaraja is suffering from severe drought and famine, and there are serious socio-political issues as well. So Vaishali, a teenage girl who is a synonym of beauty and is well versed in music, dance, and painting, and in the art of seduction too, she is sent to bring Rishi Shringa, the son of sage Vibhanda. And we know all these stories that have been just included in the Mahabharata. So that was taken and it was made into a brilliant screenplay by M.T. Vasudevan Nair. So we can say that it was a kind of intertextuality, or just a kind of intrasemiotic translation. So he's taking the material right from there. It was just a small story. His creativity comes into play. He develops it into a brilliant screenplay. And then we know that under the direction of Bharathan, it was made into an excellent film with excellent cinematography and with the music by Bombay Ravi. And we know that the film, which was produced by Atlas Ramachandran, who was later known as Vaishali Ramachandran after that. So it created history in Malayalam cinema. So the story, which was not at all known by the people, were brought in there and beyond. But when we talk about the film, usually people may talk about the elements of the beauty of the film and things like that. But beyond that, when we examine the film, we can find that there are hints about the socio-political issues, the famine that the people suffered, the frustration that the people were undergoing, and all that. The kind of the people, how much the Devadasis suffered, the kind of alienation of particular classes. So all these kinds of things are brought in. Now let us talk about, so what I was trying to tell is, this is the kind of thing what we see in intersemiotic translation, one thing being translated into another. Now I would like to say how these kinds of intersemiotic translation how a literary text is transformed into an art from intersemiotic translation. So like a mime is presented. For example, I can tell from my real life experience, when I was teaching at Trithala Government Arts and Science College in Palakkad, just before the COVID days, we had a literary fest there. So I was the coordinator. Then we had a mime based on the Shakespearean play Macbeth. And what I could see was the students were all involved. Not the very few, but the whole class was so much involved in that, reading the acts and scenes to find out what they could do. First, we planned something like a drama, but later they turned it into a mime. So proper understanding of the text, then changing it into a new form, totally new. Their team spirit, their creativity, everything comes into play. Hope you watched the video. Was it visible? Hello? Hello? Could you watch the video? See the video of Macbeth's presentation of Macbeth as a mime? Please, please.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for that. So we could see how portion from Macbeth was taken, how it was conceived, how the idea, the linguistic aspects, the literary aspects were all imbibed by them and then was used by them, to make a totally new presentation. That is intersemiotic translation. That is intersemiotic translation. Please, there is some interference, please. Okay, so intersemiotic translation is something from the language domain, it moves on to another medium. Now we can talk about verbal narratives or katha prasangam. I have taken this particularly because there is an opportunity to study about the impact of this intersemiotic translation, because it is something that was popular a few decades back. And this katha prasangam or verbal narrative, which was a popular performing art of Kerala, had great effect on the socio-political scenario of Kerala during the Renaissance period in Kerala. So this is a kind of verbal narrative with added expressions and music. And actually it claims its origin from Harikatha Kalakshepam, which has close relation in narrative techniques, but has different kinds of theme and style. We know, like the origin of drama, this was closely associated, like we study about the origin of English drama associated with church. This was associated as a temple, associated with temples, and grew up as a temple art there. But here in Kerala, the artist who came forward with this form of art brought in world classics and other literary works before the audience. You know, this artist who performs the Katha Prasangam is called the Kathigan. He recites a story with songs and is the central figure in this art form. So the artist should be a multifaceted genius to handle the art form. You know why? Because they should have great literary skills. They should write down the screenplay, prepare everything. He or she should have an effective voice modulation, because they'll be enacting the roles, and the voice modulation is very important for each character. Then singing and acting skills, everything come into play. So verbal narrative, let us examine it a bit more as an intersemiotic translation. So this is translated from another literary source. The literary source may be a novel, poem, play, biography, short story, anything. It may be any literary discourse. The linguistically elegant literary work is transformed into another artistic form. Linguistic as well as other sign elements come into play to convey the same or even a better communication. Now, I hope this person is familiar to you. He's V. Sambashivan, as you know, a name to be written in golden letters in the cultural history of Kerala. He inaugurated a new era in Malayali culture and influenced the socio-cultural movements of the Renaissance age in Kerala. It was a period when the people of Kerala, very few people of Kerala were educated. Very few had even gone to schools. They had no opportunity to be introduced to the world classics. It was at such an age that the world classics were introduced before them, introduced before the laymen in a form and manner that they could enjoy, producing an aesthetic experience. They were so much involved in that. And many of them were motivated to read. Many of them were motivated to know more about the world outside. So the socio-political impact of Katha Prasangam was a great shaping force in the history of Kerala. Now we have similar examples from film also. For example, let us take the example of Thakazhi. Thakazhi, who always focused on the oppressed classes in his works, gave a realistic view of the fishermen folk and of a particular region of Kerala, their beliefs, their myths, their sufferings, poverty, and portrayed it interestingly with all the intensity of a love and a love failure in his novel Chemmin. And this novel, Chemmin, was read by an elite community only. A community who could read and write, a community who was interested in literature. But when it was made a film by Ramu Karyat, it won the National Award for the Best Film. And we know that the script was brilliant. And the casting with Kottarakara Sridharan Nair, Satyan, Sheila, and people still remember the classic dialogues of Sheila. Yende Kuch Mudalali, starting like that. So it is the kind of, like we may think that, no, there is one thing, people may not think of the thing in the same manner now. So when we talk about this film to the people of new generation, they may think, so after watching the film, what is there here? It is just a story of a love failure. It has nothing, no positive thinking there, nothing new to offer, things like that. How can you call it things like that? So this is called, this is how how people keep on changing, how views keep on changing about culture. As we know, romantic literature differs from the, differs a lot from the literature that comes after that. Postmodernistic literature shares some common views with modernistic literature, but it has got a number of elements how we can what we can point out that how it is different. So like that, always the views of people keep on changing. Years back, Malayalam cinema, we could see the hero and the heroine moving around the same coconut tree and singing the song in the same costume. But now people are so much there, their attention, the focus of attention cannot be kept there. So things keep on changing. But however, it is to be, we have to agree that these kinds of inter-semiotic translations were very successful as modes of transaction. These kinds of classics, either in regional literature or world classics, could be transacted to the audience only because there were kinds of inter-semiotic translation. Now the level in which, now let us go back to the Sambashivans. Verbal narrative Anna Karenina. So Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, the 19th century Russian novel Anna Karenina, is perhaps the most taught in university literature courses, as we all know. The ordinary layman of Kerala had an opportunity to experience this, this novel. How? Only because it was made and it was transformed into a form which they could enjoy. So the novel, which begins with all happy families are alike, every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. So it ranks among the very greatest works of literature, as we know. So our ordinary Malayali audience got the experience of this novel, and they were able to be familiar with Anna Karenina, the sad plight of the heroine, the situations of life, and they could realize that life is somewhat the same everywhere. The problems of life are the same. What they have to confront with are the same. So it brought in a kind of universal experience for the ordinary audience of Kerala. So as we know, love and death are the universal theme of literature is told in this novel, and it is told in an omniscient third-person perspective. And a very narrative technique was adopted by V. Sambashivan to narrate the story in his mother tongue Malayalam. So there are two kinds of changes going on there. At first, the translation was made. See, there are two, just twice removed, not twice, or thrice or four times removed from reality. So if Plato would have been there, he would not at all agree to that. So it was many times removed. So we may think, oh, is it how much of authenticity can be there? Of course, there is the element of creativity. There is the kind of like they do not take the exact text like that. Adaptations have to be made to suit the regional audience and things like that. So actually, if we go through the script and if we go through the original text of Anna Karenina, it is really interesting. The study is very interesting because the kind of linguistic perception that he has made, and then how he had perceived the story and changed it into another literary form, the script of the verbal narrative, and then presented it before the audience. This was transacted as popular art by Sambashivan. The term, as Birmingham calls it. So it is a term from cultural studies that comes in there. Superb character sketches were brought in. Superb character sketches were accentuated by some clever strokes of humor. People began to laugh and laugh. They enjoyed it so much. The aesthetic experience that they had, they flocked around in temple grounds. and church grounds for during festive occasions. It was a time when mass media was not popular. So the socio-political condition of the state should also be considered when we are to reflect further technological advancements, hegemonic masculine ideals, physical appearances, mannerisms, then the clothes they wear, their language, customs were all brought in for discussion in a common platform. And people began to think, they had new ideas, revolutionary thoughts. Same is the case with KPSC when they came forward with their dramatic presentations, bringing before the audience the revolutionary ideas of socialism. People took it up. So Inter-Semiotic Translation has played a great role in the history of Kerala, bringing about great changes. So that we have to agree to that without any doubt. Here you can see the text. So this is within the language domain, how it is an English translation of Anna Karenina. You can see that there. So it is about the meeting of Anna and Vronsky, the hero and the heroine. So I don't know, we cannot call him the hero. So anyway, about Anna and Vronsky, the central characters of the story. So this tells about, this is a meeting scene. Anna and Vronsky meet for the first time at a railway station. Anna is coming to her brother's house and she comes in train and she travels along with Vronsky's mother. And when they reach the station, I'm trying to share a video, please. Please, you must tell me if it is audible or not.
Only the video is shared. The audio is not coming through.
Oh, how is it? Okay, so if you cannot hear the audio, then I don't think there is point in sharing it. Actually, the video is, this part of the video is superb. It is a part from Anna Karenina, the scene which I have just described. There you can see that he uses music. Nalu kannugal, nalu kaattu poovugal. That is why, that is how he sings there. That is he brings in the musical element there, singing it not as I sang, very beautifully. So that is the way he presents them. I'm so sorry that I can't share it and it is not audible for you. Okay. So this is the kind of verbal, and he acts out the scene, how Anna meets Vronsky and their dialogues and the kind of sound modulation he makes and all that. You know, these dialogues have got a very significant part in communicating things in literary works. In films and all, we have so many class dialogues that people keep on repeating. So the performance, it is a live performance, the verbal eloquence, the music, the comic elements, linguistic elements, sound modulation, gestures and mannerism, characterization, everything is brought in. The emergence of a popular culture, as I told you, a world classic transacted to ordinary audience. A world classic becomes a memorable experience for an ordinary illiterate community and men who were not interested in serious and widen their perspectives on individual and society. So there is no doubt that Kathaprasangam paved the way for a new era in Kerala culture. And it improved the aesthetic framework of the minds of common people, reframed their thoughts and ideas, and helped them to gain equality, and they developed independent thinking. So there's a state of flux in gender identity, which was explored by V. Sambashivan with ease. Women did not think that they have equal status with men in Kerala. At that time, very few women had such thoughts. So he was able to bring in such thoughts. He was able to initiate a new way of thinking. So now we often talk of the terms high. Tuanal puts it was mingled there. Rigid social stratifications were rooted out. Now even people may think was something that was presented in the temple grounds or in the church grounds years back. Why should this be communicated in such a of Kerala? This is a very significant part. More than the literary text, this kind of readings help people to change, help them to develop their aesthetic sense, their behavioral patterns. So it made a great change. So popular culture or pop culture is the word I have just introduced. It's a culture based on the tastes of ordinary people rather than an educated lot. Popular culture is the entirety of ideas, perspectives, attitudes, images, and other phenomena. And within the mainstream of given culture, especially Western culture of the early to mid 20th century, you can find these things. And here, what I'm trying to do is bringing in a combination from an area of linguistics, semiotics, that is Inter-Semiotic Translation, how it is effective as a popular culture. And we know that the theoreticians like Raymond Williams have put forward the theory that culture is ordinary. It has nothing to do with high cultures. There is no differentiation between high culture and low culture. Culture is a whole way of life. And against high culture, he was against the term high culture. Culture, according to him, is a productive process. Now let us have a discussion on culture, something more about culture. Culture is a contested field, isn't it? As I told you, the taste of the people of the last generation was different from the people. We call it generation gap or things like that. We give particular names in literature like modernism and postmodernism. So it is never stable. It is something about the identity. Anything. Now people have changed. You might remember there was a slogan said by a small boy, "Chalo the Shariao, chalo the Shariao." It was a simple thing that he said. But people who were always after perfection began to accept failures, began to accept imperfections. So culture is always changing. Culture is a constantly changing dynamic field. And we know that it goes across time periods and regions. All this affects culture. Now, as I told you, Shakespeare's Macbeth was presented as a mime. And this, in fact, can be used as a... This in fact can be used as a classroom technique also. Since we know that in this digital world where teacher is no more the primary source of knowledge, in order to make classroom study interesting, these kinds of Inter-Semiotic Translation can effectively be used at least once or twice in a year. They can be given opportunities for presentations based on the literary texts they have got to study, things like that. Before moving on to the conclusion, we have to sum up a few more points. Like literature culture, you have now, I hope, understood that how these two things, two different fields of study, semiotics from the linguistic background, and how it can be used, how literature can open the semiotic door to popular culture as different forms of art. So the signs or conveyors of meaning, within the language domain are different from the different art forms. When we talk about dance, we have the Abhinaya Darpana, which is a Sanskrit treatise on Indian classical dance. So we have Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra, which deals with the emotional theory of rasa. And Bharata ascribed divine origin to drama and called it the fifth Veda after Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. So we find that, that there are particular treatises or there are particular texts that tell us how art should be. But beyond all that, you can create anything new. That is the idea that we get, because culture, as related to culture, there is nothing that is static. Now let me talk about another film that we that Malayalis so much enjoyed, Peruntachin. So talking about the master carpenter Peruntachin, we know that it was made a film, and before that very few of us have read the story. We have heard the name Peruntachin and all that, but very few of us have read the story from the Aitihya Mala in Malayalam. But when MT made it into a brilliant script, what he did was he could bring in the kind of scenes before us that could attract us so much, that could involve us so much, that we had a kind of cathartic effect after watching that. And in Perundachan, we find that the legendary carpenter Raman, who follows the social norms of the caste-oriented society, and his Kannan and his son Kannan, who is rebellious and questions the existing social system. So the film, which was released in 1990 with a script by the legend M.T. Vasudevan Nair, and we know that many legends of Perundachan are seen in this Aidihya Mala, a compilation of legends and the folklore of Kerala, written by Kottarathil Shankuni. But what we find is that this original text was not taken by MT for preparing the script. Actually, it was G. Shankarakurup's poem, Perundachan, that was taken by him. So again, we find that the both kind of intrasemiotic translation and intersemiotic translation has taken place there. Similarly, the film Kaliyatam, the play of God, which was in 1997, that the Indian Malayalam film directed by Jayaraj. The film is an adaptation of William Shakespeare's play Othello, set against the background of Theyyam performance of Kerala. So all these things, we find that adaptations of these things. So that is somewhat a close adaptation of the film, but still the background is a regional background in the Theyyam background that he tells the story. So there are things like that. And there was a question that I asked you at the beginning: why literature? Why do we read literature? And you gave so all of you, although all of you could not respond, the response that we got and what we shared about it, what we know, it's a question that needs no further discussion. But still, some of the functions that literature performs. Now, when we talk about works of Vaikam Muhammad Bashir, I'm bringing in Malayalam literature because I'm talking about the culture and intersemiotic translation in the Kerala context, because both these topics are so wide that you cannot talk about everything. And we are very familiar with the English works, and so I am trying to bring a connection with Malayalam literature. So what Vaikam Muhammad Bashir, the Daipur Sultan, he brings in his Patume, small stealing is not a stealing at all. So this is something that maybe the postmodernistic view that he has. So these kinds of things, so we may not agree with that. How can that be? We are reminded of Harishchandra's story and how it influenced Gandhi or things like that. But we are reminded of people like Madhu who had to suffer these things, just stealing some rice, some wheat or rice, just only because he was hungry. So what did Kerala society do to him? So things like that. So why do we read literature? We read literature to experience other people's life, to understand people better, to make a better social understanding. As UNESCO and UN are taking so many steps for promoting intercultural transmission between nations. So what we need is peace. What we need basically is to be happy, to have a peaceful life. So literature contributes much to that, for a proper understanding, for the cathartic effect that it brings. We cannot live many people's life. Our life is too short. We have got very few experiences. So after committing mistakes, it is difficult to delete that and come back again. So we commit mistakes. That is part of life. None of us are perfect, but still, literature helps in all that. So should it be denied for people who do not know to read? No. So for example, Ramayana and Mahabharata, small children, we had the experience of watching it in television. We used to rush to see all these things. And I still remember that how much the characters of those presentations influenced us. We used to say all those dialogues and all that. I think the first feminist I have seen is Panchali, who calls out to Krishna, although she had 5 husbands. In order to help her, she had to call out to her friend Krishna. So Bhagwan Krishna comes there to rescue her. So all these things, these are imprinted in our mind because all our senses are involved in these kinds of presentations. So what I would like to conclude is that there is no doubt that intersemiotic translation is a means of transference of popular culture, and it has, of course, literature has much more to do than that. Let me recite a few 4 lines from Bhumi Kuru Charamageetam by O.N.V. Kurup. I think there are a few people who are not from the Malayali background, but still with your permission. So N.V. Kurup, famous lines in that poem is, Iniyum marikkatta bhoomin nasanna mridil ninakatma shanti. So the 4 lines I am going to recite is, Ariyada jananiye parineyichora yavana tarunante kathetra palagi. Pudiya kathe ezhudunnu vasudhayude makkalivar vasudhayude vastramuriyunnu. So there are people who are not from this background. Let me just translate that. We are doing translation. So I would like to make use of that. Ariyada jananiye parineyichora yavana tarunante kathetra palagi. It is an old story of Oedipus. So it is a cross-cultural reference and intertextual reference that, and an intrasemiotic translation that I am doing here. Pudiya kathe ezhudunnu vasudhayude makkalivar vasudhayude vastramuriyunnu. So talking about how the children of Mother Earth are exploiting her, so molesting her. So the kind of eco-critical reading is there, the kind of intertextuality comes in there, the kinds of the myth is operating there, the kind of sarcasm, the technique. See, just 4 lines from Malayalam literature, Bhumikku Chanamageetham by N.V. Kurup. So literature has no boundaries. It extends, we can find the echoes of all these things in literatures of different languages, different cultures. So sharing those things will surely make you confident, surely make you more self-reliant to face life boldly. I hope I have made a genuine attempt to transact few things. I know there were defects also. So sorry for not sharing the video. There were some difference. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smita, for that very enlightening session. Participants, you are free to ask questions. You may use the chat box too.
Please, you are always free to ask questions. Literature is the mirror of life. Very nice comments. Of course, literature is like a mirror held up to the life of any age. Very nice. That is, in fact, that's what I was trying to tell you. The life that was presented in earlier films, where they show life is very simple. The problems of Esther years were different. Famine, poverty, things like that. Unfulfilled love. It doesn't mean love is always fulfilled now. But the children or the generation is bold enough for that.
Oh, ma'am. Smita, ma'am, can you hear me?
Any questions? Any questions? Please. You're most welcome for that. Thank you for the comments. Please.
Ma'am, can I go ahead?
Please.
I have a question. Like nowadays, like we have access to a number of, access to these dramas and television series, which is worldwide. So, I would like to know that, because we see the sub captions in these and we watch that despite not knowing the culture very well, right? We get to understand that. So how would you kind of, read through an intersemiotic reading in this case, this kind of a text?
Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. Actually, the answer to this is that culture is not static. Things keep on changing. And intersemiotic translation, which reflects culture, it is not static and it is reflective. It produces new things from that, very creative. So what you said is true. This can be taken as one of the drawbacks of intersemiotic translation also. To what extent can the intersemiotic translation be genuine? That is a question that we have to discuss. So, but what we have to say is they don't mean to produce the original text, but there is the case of people interpreting the epics wrongly or the original without understanding the original text. Of course, that is true, but we always accept such things. because it is there in the postmodernistic view. Things keep on changing, things are reflective, creative. The originality of the text cannot be maintained to that extent. Okay, it's a wonderful question.
Ma'am, I'm talking in terms of these, other languages texts, like, see, if you're talking about a Chinese drama,
Yes.
so the interpretation can go very opposite to, because we are just consuming it as a reader and we're interpreting it, right? So in that context, like, how will be semiotics kind of be helpful, ma'am?
Now, ma'am, it's whether it's Chinese, whether it is Indian, or whether it is from any other nation. We are talking about inter-semiotic translation, both within the language domain. Within the language domain, it does not exist within the language domain alone. But we know that we are watching a Chinese play, a Chinese mime. When we're watching a Chinese mime, there is no matter. We can understand it, isn't it? Because the signs and symbols are there. But we are watching a dance now. We are watching a dance here. If you are not very familiar with what each symbol signifies, we cannot understand it fully.
Yes.
It is not. We don't need to go to Chinese for that. It may be an art form like that. But the kind of effect that a drama produces, in the drama there is the dialogue. So dialogues have got to do a lot. So there is the kind of linguistic elements which comes to play. In intersemiotic translations like that, you can only stay within the language domain. But it would be better than the intrasemiotic translation, which exists only within the language domain.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Smita ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. See, in the first part of your presentation, I think you had referred to an original text of Ramayana.
Yes.
And I think it is, what shall I say? It's a bit controversial to talk about original text of Ramayana, especially, see, I had listened to Sunil P. Ilaydam's speech, and he spoke about more than 300 versions of Ramayana.
Yes,
and, across the country, you will find variant versions of the same. So such cultural codes cannot be, I think, reduced to the so-called originality or authenticity. That's one thing. Secondly, ma'am, you had spoken about Kathaprasangam as verbal narrative, right? Now, I do not know whether it is actually a translation of Kathaprasangam as verbal narrative. My question is, why can't we speak about a poem
please,
also
not audible.
as a verbal narrative? Am I audible to you, ma'am? Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can I speak now? Can I speak now?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So let me start from what you have ended. I did not talk about a poem as a verbal narrative. I was just trying to communicate it as a piece of literature, how literature communicates to us, how we could bring in the different theoretical aspects there, how it affects life, how it communicates to us. So I did not say about the poem as a verbal narrative. And then about the term verbal narrative, please, sir. So please, if that is not the right translation for Kathaprasangam, can you please tell me the right phrase that I can use so that I can make the change there, please?
Ma'am, I think we can use the very same word, Kathaprasangam, because you cannot actually say Kathaprasangam alone as verbal narrative, simply because several other genres of literature are actually verbal narrative.
Sir, is there an alternative for that? For verbal narrative, another word? No. So you're saying I can use Kathaprasangam itself?
Yes.
Sir, surely I have used the word surely. Please, there is some sound coming in between.
Doesn't matter. No, I was just.
Okay, sir. Let me tell you, sir. It is. Ma'am, please ask to mute that. Please mute that.
കഴിക്കണതിനനുസരിച്ച് ഊരിയാ മതി, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതൊക്കെ പിളിഞ്ഞു പിളിഞ്ഞു പോകും. എന്നിട്ട് കഴിക്ക്.
Can I speak? Now, to tell about that, there is no word. I referred to many textbooks. I was actually talking to Vasanta Kumar Sambashivan sir, who is a faculty of the Kathaprasangam Institute of Trivandrum. And he's
Madam, may I make a comment?
Please, sir, let me stop. Please, if you can ask them to mute it, I can continue. I have an answer for that, please. So,
set box
the thing is that there is no other word that has been coined for that, but verbal narrative
Madam,
can be verbal narrative, and I substitute it also with another word, Kathaprasangam, as it is narrating a katha or a story. It's narrating.
Madam,
Ma'am, please unmute them. The others. I use the two terms Kathaprasangam and verbal narrative alternatively, and as you said, Kathaprasangam.
Manu nama laptop lu vechera ba Kamala kuttine vilichittu va chelle addi kittuda kurumbu aatti enna
1 minute, we are trying to unmute. Okay, please bear with us.
Please, sure, ma'am. Hello, can I speak now? Okay, sir, as you said, when I asked you to give another word to substitute the verbal narrative by another term, you said that Kathaprasangam can be used. I said, I use the term Kathaprasangam, but we know that there are people from other linguistic areas who have joined us. So I just wanted to make substitute it, Kathaprasangam, by a word that would stand very close to that. And so I used verbal narrative along with Kathaprasangam. Now, going back to the first question Soni sir said, is that about how far these epics can be genuinely presented as Inter-Semiotic Translation before the audience who have not read the original text. And you spoke about how Sunil P. Laidam said that there are so many versions of the Ramayana. Of course, that is what I was trying to tell. Culture is not static, so it's not literature. Every new literary work arising or emerging from the previous literary work has got its own artistic improvisations. They have their own changes. They are not static. That is the creativity of the writer. That is the creativity of the presenter. So we cannot say that when an artist produces it, there is no rule. It should be genuine. It should be like that. It can. So that was what I was trying to tell you. When Chemin was made a film, there were so many adaptations that were made. So you said that Sunil P. Laidam said that there are so many versions for the Ramayana. We know there are so many versions for the Ramayana where Sita is presented as the daughter of Ravana and how it was made into a very famous poem. We all know such things. So there are things like that. Eluthachan, when he used a version of Ramayana, he produced his own version because it was a time when there was degradation in the Kerala society, where people were all involved in so many things that were not good for the society. So he wanted to bring in the Bhakti cult. So he began to give bring the Bhakti cult through the Ramayana, bringing in verses that were not actually there in the Ramayana. He began to share things, advices by Krishna, long phrases, long pages and pages of advice to Arjuna. And that was for sorry, not to Arjuna, the long things. And when he brought in the Mahabharata also, he brought in things that were not in the original text. But it was with a good intention. That was his creativity. And all these things were for the reformation of the people of that period. I don't believe that literature should always aim at such things, but it was like that. We should be able to take things as it is. We cannot say that all the translation should be genuine, 100%. It should be in accordance with that original text, or this is original. What you said is true. True art, literature should open a door to semiotic. It opens a semiotic door to discussions too. So always these kinds of contradictions should be discussed. Thank you for that. Please.
Question from Govind.
Please go.
Mr. Govind had a question.
Govind, please come up with your question. Please, any more questions?
Yes, any more questions, participants? I saw one Mr. Govind, he was wanting to ask a question, but now he is not there, I think. Anyone else with questions? May please ask.
Please, Govind.
Madam.
Yes, please, sir.
Madam, can I make a comment?
Please, sir, most welcome, please.
Madam, I was.
Please.
Madam, I was just listening to this discussion on you are talking about the possibility of finding a translation for Kathaprasangam.
Yes, sir. Most welcome.
I'm not able to. Actually, there is a parallel to Kathaprasangam in the Italian operatic tradition.
Yes.
Kathaprasangam is combining three different elements. One is narrative, the second one is song, and the third one is. These are the three things that are combined into the Kathaprasangam tradition.
Yes.
And from the Italian operatic tradition, you have a particular aspect called the aria, A-R-I-A.
Yes, sir.
This is what I believe to be closely parallel to the Kathaprasangam tradition.
Yes, sir.
So maybe this is a local version of the aria.
Sir, let me tell you, Harikatha Kalakshepam, which originated as a temple art, is basically from which Kathaprasangam derives its origin. And that there, material like religious material were used for presentation. But when it came to Kerala, this art form became very popular, bringing in the different like biographies and world classics, the regional literature, everything was brought in and it was transacted before the audience. As you said, I have watched this kind of thing when I went to Italy a few years back. Sir. What you said is very true. It is called aria, but I forgot the name now, but you have just reminded me. And it was a kind of local, like in a street, there was a ground there. And, in the weekends, people often joined there for celebrations. And it was a kind of a presentation that was made before a small local audience. And it was wonderful. I had the experience of that years back, I think in 2014, when I visited Rome. There was a presentation, and what you said is very true. And regarding Kathaprasangam, we cannot use that word here because it is in the Italian background. So whenever I make a reference to that, I use Kathaprasangam, and in addition to that, make a verbal narrative itself until we find a new translation. I have searched so many books related to that. I have spoken to the faculty of the Kathaprasangam Institute at Trivandrum, but they were also telling, when you get a new term, you can just tell us also. That was what Dr. Vasantakumar Sambashivan, son of Dr. Sambashivan, told me recently also. And then regarding this music and things, what you said, that is very true. All these three elements are brought in. Earlier, an instrument called the chaplangota, that is what it was called. That was the only instrument that was used to create music along with the vocal music. But now there are so many instruments, violin, clarinet, and keyboard, everything is used in modern Kathaprasangams. What you said is very true, sir. Thank you for that information. Please. Any more questions?
Not a question, but I just thought, just a little more about that. Actually, if we talk of, you were mentioning Katha Kalakshepam, yes. So in fact, even Ramayana itself is a narrative by Love and Kush at Rama's court. So Valmiki, also makes it as a narrative. So that itself is a narrative. so it's in the form of a narrative. So, I mean, it's such an ancient tradition here. It's maybe thousands of years, so we don't know. So that also is a narrative. So
yes, ma'am, that is a wonderful thought, ma'am. Thank you for sharing that. Something like the narrative within the narrative, something like metafiction, isn't it? Thank you. It's a lovely thought, ma'am.
Thank you, Namaskar.
Any more, or shall we wind up? Because anyway, I'm so happy that we could initiate a very controversial discussions and very lovely comments and all that after the talk. Thank you for bearing with me for more than an hour. So, shall we wind up?
So, on behalf of the Department of English, National College, we extend our sincere gratitude to you, Dr. Smita, for that very well-planned, enlightening session. And we thank you, all the participants, for keeping the session lively, for your questions, for your comments. We thank you one and all. Now we move on to, we are having our paper presentations. And the paper presentations will be through the Google Meet link, which will be provided in the conference groups. We have 2 groups. And our valedictory session is at 4 p.m. And only those who join the valedictory session and fill in the feedback forms will be given participation certificates. So it's mandatory that if you want the certificate for this 2-day international conference, you have to attend the valedictory session. And it is the same Zoom link for the valedictory section. And you have to attend that and fill the feedback form, and the certificate will be generated. So thank you, participants. So now we move on to our paper presentation. Dr. Smita, we will be sharing the link and the papers. You
so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Papers.
Thank you all. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
This is the Smita. No. Session. Session 2. The session. No, session 1. The same thing. And one more, no? No, we should, I think we have to create you create the field for supremacy. You get a photo of the one more paper was there. Let me send it to her. That's the supremacy in the way. Other more at the share. No, I sent to Smita, and we put we put it this one, no, for paper presentations. Then for the that is in FMNC conference 1. FMNC conference 1 also we put. This is which one? This is for Smita itself. Huh?
Ah, yes.
This is the same thing.
Same
No?
thing. Now, should we call Supremus?
Call Supremus. All Supremus' photo ingot aaycha. Any aaycha. Alla any aaycha.
This is link create your Google Meet. And if you change it, then you can change.
അങ്ങനെയാ തോന്നുന്നത്. ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് ധാരണയില്ല, വലിയ ധാരണയില്ല. എന്നെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം രാജഭാഷ കൊളീഗല്ല, എൻ്റെ സാറാണ് എന്നെ പഠിപ്പിച്ച എൻ്റെ അധ്യാപകൻ കൂടിയാണ് രാജഭാഷ. അപ്പോൾ അതിൽ വല്ലാത്തൊരു എന്താ പറയുക, നല്ല ഭംഗിയുണ്ട് കാണാൻ. രാഹുൽ ഭാര്യ ഭംഗിയുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ ഭാര്യയെക്കാളും കൂടുതൽ പുള്ളിയുടെ ഭാര്യ ഭംഗി കൂടുതലാണ്. She's still working. 10 വയസ്സിന് വ്യത്യാസമില്ല, 50 വയസ്സാകുമ്പോൾ എന്തായാലും നിർത്തുമല്ലോ. ഞാൻ വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്നത് പറഞ്ഞോ? ഇല്ല.